Hello, my name is Jeremy Hauk, and I'd like to thank you for making the choice to join us here at the Greenbrier Church Online. I don't have a story to draw you in today, just really a confession that this is one of those passages that I wanted to skip when I was planning the series. It's not that I don't think the story's important, and it's not that I don't think Jesus meant what he says here. It's just that every time I read it, my brain does that thing where you're reading the words and they just stop making sense. And so you've got to go back and read it again and again and again. If you've ever read Luke 16, you've probably had that exact same reaction. I'm sorry, what did Jesus just say? Here's the setup. You got a manager who cheats his boss. He gets caught. He's about to be fired. And so he runs around behind the boss's back, slashes everybody's debt, and essentially buys himself a network of friends on his way out the door. And then, and this is the part that I struggle with and I have to go back and reread 100 times, the boss commends him, and Jesus seems to just hold this guy up as an example for us to follow. At first pass, it sounds like Jesus is giving a master class in fraud. But here's what I've learned about the moments when the Bible confuses me the most. Those are usually the moments where if I'll just slow down and do the work, I discover that Jesus says something that completely reframes how I see my entire life. This parable is one of those moments. You see, it's not confusing because it's broken. It's confusing because we read it from the wrong zip code with the wrong set of assumptions. So I want us to try to fix that today. I want us to try to hear what the original crowd actually heard, and I want it to land on us the way that it was meant to. There was a certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. One day, a report came that the manager was wasting his employer's money. So the employer called him in and said, "What's this I hear about you? Get your report in order because you are going to be fired." The manager thought to himself, "Now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches, and I'm too proud to beg. I know how to ensure that I'll have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I'm fired." So he invited each person who owed money to his employer to come to and discuss the situation. He asked the first one, "How much money do you owe him?" The man replied, "I owe him 800 gallons of olive oil." So the manager told him, "Take the bill and quickly change it to 400 gallons. "And how much do you owe my employer?" he asked the next man. "I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat," was the reply. "Here," the manager said, "take the bill and change it to 800 bushels. The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. And it's true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of light. So, yeah, okay." Now, before you walk away thinking Jesus just endorsed white collar fraud, I think we need to figure out what's actually happening, because I promise you the original audience isn't as confused as we are. You got to know that they are in the crowd. You've got the Pharisees standing off to the side trying to trap Jesus, and you have the tax collectors and the other sinners pushing their way up front, trying to get as close to Jesus as possible. So the front couple rows are people who knew what it felt like to cheat and to be desperate and to need mercy. And Jesus says there's this certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. Now, in that culture, a manager is not just an employee, he handles everything. His job title is tied to his social status, his housing, his daily meals, his future. When you stewarded somebody's estate, you had full authority over all of the assets. You signed contracts, you collected debts, you oversaw crops, you made business decisions. I don't want you to think this is somebody who's just signing paperwork. He's running the whole operation, which means if he lost his job, it's not just an inconvenience, it's catastrophic. He'd lose his home, his income, his reputation. And there's something else here that I normally have missed. The ancient world ran on this patron-client system that functions kind of like social currency. You don't just have money, you have relationships. Debts aren't financial transactions, they're social bonds. So when somebody owes you something, they're obligated to you, not just financially, but socially. So when the original listeners heard this story, they understood the stakes immediately. And when the master calls the manager in and says, get your report in order because you're going to be fired, they knew what that meant. They knew that everything is about to fall apart. So the manager panics and he thinks, I don't have the strength to dig ditches, and well, I'm really too proud to beg. Manual labor is beneath his status. Begging meant that he would lose all of his respect. So he does something bold. He calls in the master's debtors and he starts slashing their bills. 800 gallons of oil, cut it in half. 1,000 bushels of wheat, make it 800. He's basically got the books open and he's rewriting everything. Now, I think we're confused because we don't really know what he's cutting. There are a few ideas that might be helpful. One strong possibility is that he's cutting his own commission. Managers in that world often added their own fee on top of the actual debt. The 800 gallons may have been 400 gallons of real debt plus 400 gallons of the manager's cut. So by removing his markup, he's not technically stealing from the master at all. He's forfeiting his own future earnings to make friends. And that's not fraud, that's really expensive generosity. Another possibility is that the original loans included interest charges that, violated Jewish law. Charging interest among fellow Israelites was prohibited under the Torah. So if he removed that interest, the manager is actually bringing the debts into legal and religious compliance, which would have made the master look righteous and generous in the eyes of the community. Either way, the crowd would have picked up on something important. This isn't a story about a villain pulling a heist. It's a story about a resourceful person in a desperate situation using every tool available to secure his future. And it also accomplished something else. It made the debtors accomplices. If they ever turned on this manager later, he could say, you signed the bill, you were part of the whole deal. So he has loyalty and leverage at the same time. It's really smart. Shady, but smart. And here's where Jesus drops the moment that everybody in the crowd would have felt in their chest. The master finds out and commends him, not for being dishonest, but for being shrewd. Think about it from the master's perspective. His manager just went out into the community and made everybody feel great about the estate. The debtors are all going around saying, you're not going to believe what the landowner just did for us. He cut our bills. The master's reputation just goes up in the eyes of the community. He may have lost a little money, but in a culture built on honor, he gained something much more valuable. And he recognized a shrewd move when he saw one. And that's when Jesus turns to the crowd and says the line that makes us all squirm. The children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of light. That's not a compliment for the world. That's a rebuke to the church. Jesus is saying, look at this guy. He saw the crisis clearly. He addressed his resources and he acted decisively. He used what he had to secure his future. And here you are sitting, claiming that you believe in eternity, that you believe in a kingdom that lasts forever, and you are less strategic about your eternal future than this crooked manager is about a temporary one. And if that doesn't make you squirm just a little, then maybe you need to sit with it just a little longer. I mean, think about how much energy people pour into things that don't last. We plan our careers, our investments, our vacations, our retirement. We protect and guard our comfort and our money. We're thoughtful and strategic and wildly intentional about the things that only last for a little while. And Jesus looks at his followers and says, are you that intentional about your eternity? Are you that urgent about my kingdom? Are you that careful about the only thing that will last forever? How many of us spend our strength on what's temporary while neglecting what's eternal? That's the point of the story. That's your mustard seed. But before we close, I want us to take a few moments to unpack the big truths found in this story. And the first is we have to understand that you are a manager, not an owner. You don't actually own anything. Every dollar in your bank account, every square foot of your house, every position of influence that you hold has been entrusted to you by a master who's one day going to call you to give an account of your management. Your bank account, you don't own that. You manage it. The car you drive, it's just on loan to you. Your house, temporary. Paycheck, nothing more than a trust fund for the kingdom. And the moment that we start acting like owners, like it's ours to clutch and to protect and to spend on ourselves, we start making decisions that we'd never make if we remembered who all of this actually belongs to. There's a simple question that reorients everything. Before you spend money, before you say yes to something, before you decide to protect it, ask yourself, if I had to give an account to the owner, how would that conversation go? That's not meant to paralyze you. It's meant to reorient us into a better way of thinking and understanding. A good manager doesn't spend the owner's resources on himself and say, everything's fine. But he also doesn't go off and bury it in the ground and call it faithful. He takes what he has and he puts it to work. He uses it strategically for the owner's purposes. Secondly, money is a tool, not a treasure. Jesus calls worldly wealth unrighteous, not because money's evil, but because it's temporary. Inflation, market crash, bad debt, decisions, death, it all is going to go away eventually. Every dollar that you have will one day leave your hands. The question Jesus is asking is, what is it going to accomplish before it does? Money's kind of like a hammer I have in my house. I can build something beautiful with it, or I can break and destroy something with it. But either way, the hammer is just a tool. And it makes a terrible God and a horrible master. Jesus says, use your money now to invest in people who will welcome you into heaven later. Every check you write, every dollar you spend, every financial decision you make is a spiritual decision. You're either using it to serve God and love people, or you're allowing your money to become your master. Tristan and I used to go to church with this guy who kept a jar in his kitchen labeled Kingdom Fund. And whenever he heard about a need, a single mom who was struggling to pay rent, one of the kids in the youth group trying to go on a mission trip, a neighbor who lost his job, he'd go get that jar of money and he'd pray, Lord, what can we do with this? And the guy wasn't wealthy and he wasn't flashy. He was just intentional. Every day he put money in a jar so that he could use those temporary resources for eternal impact. That's being shrewd in the kingdom. Number 3, the little things are actually the big things. Jesus drops a line that sounds like it belongs on a motivational poster, but it's actually one of the most countercultural things he ever said. If you are faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you are dishonest in the little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. I mean, how many of us think if God would just give us this big opportunity, just imagine how faithful we would be? Jesus says it doesn't work that way. The big opportunity only reveals who you already are. It doesn't create who you will become. Who you become gets formed in the small decisions, the everyday moments, the choices that nobody else is watching. How you handle $10 tells God something about how you would handle $10,000. If you're not generous with a little, you will never be generous with a lot. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how much do you have, it's about who are you. Faithful people are faithful people, whether they have a lot or a little. Unfaithful people are unfaithful, and they always have an excuse about why. Fourthly, you're going to serve something. The only question is what? Jesus closes with what is probably the most famous line in the whole passage: you cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. I think we've heard it so many times that it barely registers. We can't let the familiarness of this dull the edge of what he's actually saying. He's not saying don't have money. He's not saying money is evil. He's saying that money makes a horrible master. Money is relentless. It whispers that you'll be okay if you just have a little more. It'll tell you that your real security is found in your account balance, not in the provider. And it slowly but surely starts calling the shots in your life if you let it. There's this diagnostic question that cuts right to the heart of it. What is the thing that, when it is threatened, makes you the most anxious? Your heart rate goes up, your sleep suffers, and you start making decisions that don't line up with who you say you are. Because whatever that thing is, that functions as your master. And here's the part that should actually shock us. And I want to make sure that we don't miss the grace in the story, because it's easy to walk away thinking that this is just a sermon about financial responsibility. You got to look at what the master actually does in the parable. The manager, guilty. He's been wasting the master's possession, wasting, just like the story of the prodigal son. That boy wasted everything. This is not a one-time mistake. This is a lifestyle. And the master doesn't throw him into the debtor's prison. He doesn't pursue revenge. He lets him keep working until the transaction is complete, and even commends him at the end. There's mercy woven all throughout the story that the original audience would have felt, they would have picked up on. They would have understood it's the gospel underneath the parable. You and I have mismanaged God's resources, honestly. We've wasted his grace. We've spent his blessings on our own selfishness, and we deserve to be fired. We deserve condemnation. But the master comes to us and says, I'm not going to settle the accounts just yet. In fact, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you keep managing, but don't use what I have given you to build your own kingdom. Use your gifts and your resources to build my kingdom. And do that by loving people, by being generous, because the only thing you're going to take to heaven with you is people. Grace is more shocking than fraud. And that's the real scandal of the story. So here's what I want you to walk away with today. There's a moment coming for each and every one of us that echoes the opening of this parable. The moment when the rich man says to the manager, you need to give an account. And I don't say that to scare you. I just want to remind you that we're all managers, and this is all temporary, and the accounting is very real. The good news, actually the great news, is that we don't face that accounting on our own merits. Jesus already covered our failures through the cross. The question isn't whether you're going to be condemned. The question is, what kind of life have you lived? What kind of fruit have you grown from the resources that you were given? Who's going to be in eternity because of how you used what was in your hands? The dishonest manager understood urgency. He didn't have the luxury of procrastination. He made a plan and he executed it. He didn't wring his hands or wait for the perfect conditions. He used what was in front of him and he went to work. And Jesus looks at us today, people who actually know how the story ends, people who have been handed the truth about eternity, and he says, be intentional, be urgent about the things that will actually last. Here's what I want you to do as we end this sermon today. And there's just one thing I want you to do. I want you to look at your life, your time, your money, your influence, your relationships, and I want you to ask one honest question. Am I managing these things like someone who actually believes in eternity? Or am I managing them like someone who's trying to build the most comfortable life before I die? Because honestly, those are two very different lives. And only one of them matters past the moments of this world. I want to be the kind of person who gets to eternity and finds a crowd of people there people who I prayed for, who I invested in, who I told the truth, who I extended grace and mercy, who I shared a meal with, who I mentored through a hard season. And I want them to be there because of what God did through me and through the resources that he put in my hands. That's what Jesus is after with this parable, I believe. Not guilt, not performance, not a new budget spreadsheet. He's after a fundamental reorientation about how we see the world. A moment where we finally see the resources in our lives are not trophies to collect, but tools to deploy in the building and the advancement of his kingdom.